The Arctic Ocean. It nurtures seals, whales, walruses, polar bears, and millions of seabirds, just to name a few. This wildlife lets humans thrive here too. Indigenous peoples have relied on the Arctic Ocean for millennia. Today, Arctic habitats are threatened by a warming planet and melting sea ice. Meanwhile, oil companies want to drill for oil and gas deep beneath the seabed. It's a dreadful idea. Here's why. You've likely seen oil spills in the news. In 2010, the deadly Deepwater Horizon disaster dumped millions of barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico, fouling hundreds of miles of coastline, killing marine and coastal life, and making people sick. Imagine a spill like that in a dark, remote place, 1,000 miles from any port, with ice and brutal weather making cleanup essentially impossible. Offshore drilling doesn't just threaten life in the Arctic. It's bad for the whole planet. To meet goals the U.S. set to combat climate change, we must accelerate our transition to clean, renewable energy and leave fossil fuels under the Arctic Ocean.
Assalamualaikum and hi, welcome back to another day with Women's Today. My name is Atikah, a lecturer in University Technology Mara, as your special host for today's episode. As we all know, we are now in the midst of pandemic, but it doesn't stop us to share and discuss about issues that happen in this world. Today, our topic is about Arctic offshore drilling. As usual, we will ask our audience to share their concerns or questions about related topic through our Facebook page beforehand. At the end of the program, audience watching from home can give us a call to share their opinions or questions about today's discussion. We have invited 4 panels, including me, to discuss today's topic. I present to you Let's start with the first question. Do you find one framing of the situation more compelling than the other? Why? In what ways do your own beliefs or opinion affect your perspective on this issue? I would like to invite Nur Afifah to answer this question.
Maria, for the question, based on the case study given, I found there is one framing of the situation more compelling than the other because it was stated that by drilling in the Arctic can present a way for Americans to mitigate risk from dependence on foreign oil and also build the local and national economy. In addition, United States also can boost up their economy and workforce by creating jobs and supplying cheap oil. Even though this activity gives benefit to US, it will cause harm to environment and also animals in the Arctic. In my opinion, drilling is danger to the Arctic environment. The Arctic is considered a dangerous area to search for oil due to the difficulties posed by the landscape, which is covered full ice for much of the years. These additional risks mean that the drilling setup process would take longer than the preparation for drilling in other parts of the world. The process involves the development of offshore drilling platform, risk, and the transportation of people and material via shipping routes. The presence of ice floes can damage the offshore facilities while also hindering the shipment of personal material, equipment, and also oil for long time periods. The harsh Arctic climate creates an environment that few creatures can survive in. The climate is cool and there is a little plant life present because of the nutrient poor soils and the low angle of the sun at the Arctic latitudes. Many Arctic species are endemic to these regions, meaning that they cannot be found anywhere else in the world. These species have specific adaptation that allow them to survive in this environment, and these specific adaptations are not applicable to any other climate condition. And phytoplankton are the Arctic's primary producer, and during the 24-hour period of light in the summer, the edge of the ice floes are home to large algal blooms. These organisms comprise the lowest trophic level, meaning that they form the basis of the food web, and they are eaten by the primary consumers such as zooplankton. And killer whales are the top predators in the Arctic, meaning they are consumed other large predators such as pinnipeds. Due to the lack of trophic diversity in this region, species are dependent upon a small variety of the other species to provide them with the necessary energy to survive. Thus, the removal of any other species would be deleterious to the food web as a whole. For example, if something happened to decrease the population of zooplankton, then there would not be enough food available for other organisms, and their population also would decrease. This would then also lead to the decrease in population of seal and also walrus, because their food supply would be depleted, and eventually polar bear would also experience a decrease in population. So that we all need to realize that this kind of offshore drilling will destroy the ecosystem in Arctic. Yes, it is true that by drilling offshore can give more benefit in terms of the economy, such as supplying cheap oil. But we need to see the other side, which is it can make harm and also danger to the Arctic. I think that's all that I can share with you, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, Nur Afifah, for the interesting sharing. Let's move on to the next question. If you were in the President Obama position, how might the different ways of framing the issue affect your decision-making process? Is it possible to make an objective decision in the case of Arctic drilling? How might you come to a decision that is both reasonable and ethically defensible? Thank you for an interesting question. I would like to invite Ms. Fatini to answer this question.
Thank you, Maria, for having me today in this prestigious talk show of 2020, which is Women's Today, even though we're still in the midst of this pandemic. So you asked me, if I were in President Obama's position, how might the different ways of framing this issue affect my decision-making process? Is it possible to make an objective decision in the case of Arctic drilling? And also, how might I come to a decision that is both reasonable and ethically defensible? So to recap, back in August 2015, President Barack Obama had launched an expansion of offshore drilling in several locations, which is along the east coast, from Delaware to Florida, Gulf of Mexico, and also Alaska. So this is because he believes that by doing so, he could resolve several economic problems faced by his country, which is United States of America, including boosting the national security, including he could increase the job opportunities, and also he could provide the people with reliable and safe supply of oil. And for your question, if I were in President Obama's positions or place, it would be hard for me to make an objective decision, as I only left with two options, which is whether I want to save the environment or the country's economy. So in this case, it is obvious that the President Obama had chose economy over environment. However, Little that we know that Americans depends on their oil and gas industry for quite a long period of time. On top of that, as of 2019, they have become and they have recognized as the top largest oil industry in the world, followed by Saudi Arabia and Russia and also other countries. Thus, the government of United States will do everything it takes to maintain the recognition and also the reputations of their oil industry, even if it takes to harm the environment. So, but in my opinion, every planning must come with limitations so that we would not cross the limit and boundaries. Because as humans, we tend to cross limits and boundaries. So, in this case, the dispute arises between the two parties, which is the oil industry company leaders and also the environmentalists. Both parties demanded totally two different things. So the environmentalist is fighting to save nature, and obviously they against the idea of expanding the offshore drilling. Meanwhile, the oil economy leaders supported the issue as it would bring revenues to the company lah. So, in my opinion, the most objective decisions that the President Obama could make is by declaring some limitations to his idea or his motions, which is expanding the offshore drilling in Arctic. So, the first limitation that he could impose is that he could permit the offshore drilling up to 2 to 3 years only, and after that the president should ban the activity for good. So by doing this, the nature would not be affected that much compared to if he were not to ban the activities, and if it were compared to lifetime permission of offshore drilling. So however, this limitation would lead to another major problem, which is non-stop drilling, as they feel like they will only give limited time of drilling, which is 2 to 3 years. So the oil industry will start to overwork their workers day and night to drill as much as all as they can. Hence, President Obama should introduce a second limitation, which is by fixing the daily drilling. So the United States government may consider to form a corporate body or a group of expertise to inspect the daily production of oil drilling in the Arctic. For those who refuse to abide the rules or regulations, they should be penalized, and even the government can even revoke their drilling permit if the issue prolonged. So the third limitation that I would suggest is for the United States government should only give up the drilling permits only to the oil and gas companies that work under the government. This will make the process of inspection much easier and effective. So these limitations that I have suggested before, which is the first one is for the president to ban the activities for good after 2 to 3 years of handling this activity, and the second one is to limit the daily drilling of oil, and the third one is giving out the permit to oil companies that work under government, which is for now is only Shell. So I know that these suggestions still may disappoint the environmentalists, because the nature will be affected even if the drilling will be held for only a day. So they were afraid that the oil drill might leak to the ocean surface and harm the native animals there, as the animals there were already harmed by the climate change and the rising of global temperature. So the environmentalists also might not agree with the 2 years of offshore drilling that I have suggested, so they prefer no drilling at all to protect Arctic and the habitats living there. That's all from me. Back to Maria.
Next, can you think of other ethical dilemmas that are unexplored or absent in this dominant competing frames of offshore drilling? How might these additional issues affect the decision to drill in Arctic? I would like to invite Miss Nicole Natasha to answer this question.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator, for inviting me to this wonderful show and would listen to my insights. The oil deposits in the Arctic in 1920 was discovered, and it has been a controversy between the environmental activists and oil and gas companies to allow drilling at the Arctic offshore, and this involves big fossil fuel companies. Now you may ask, what is ethical dilemmas? Ethical dilemmas can be defined as a conflict between alternatives where no matter what a person does, some ethical principle will be compromised. Analyzing the options and their consequences provides the basic elements for decision making. Thus, the question here is, can the Americans have both environmental preservation and expand oil drilling? Ethical dilemmas forces people to choose critically, as they cannot have both at the same time. Now that is what we call dilemma. Now, the first ethical dilemmas would be between having own resources and disrupting the environment. The former President of the United States of America, President Barack Obama, was known by the people as a leader who was not only actively fighting for equality, but was also fighting for climate change. However, his decision to approve an oil and gas company, the biggest oil and gas company, the Royal Dutch Shell's oil and gas exploration of Alaska, was seen by the environmentalists as a contradiction. What makes the government to allow and support such action? The oil and gas company are recognized as being part of the vital sectors in the U.S. economy for both long and short term. Ever since the allowance of oil and gas drilling, the country saw an opportunity to decrease the dependency and to obtain their own resources. Now, that is one of the reasons why America really want to explore oil and gas drilling, and especially in the Arctic, because in the Arctic it was found that the oil available there is 3 billion tons of oil. And then the environmentalists would object to activities, as they believe that the environment on the Arctic is different in terms of its coldness, and place is currently facing global disaster as the Arctic sea ice shrunk at an alarming fast rate due to climate change. The second ethical dilemma would be in the perspective of the government roles in the economy. Now, we know that the government's aim is to protect and enhance the country's economy. Therefore, the oil and gas drilling would benefit in terms of improving the financial or social protection of the country and also expand job opportunities. However, the activities of oil and gas drilling would eventually damage both the oil market and also the environment. The US government encouraged domestic production of energy sources such as natural gas oil. To make this happen, the government is willing to offer generous advantages to investors who are needed to develop the domestic industries. Furthermore, government also finds out that the benefits of oil and gas drilling would create 840,000 job opportunities. This is according to an article that was written in 2017. It was believed that the more job opportunities available to the citizens, the better the economy is. However, there will be consequences on the environment, and this includes wildlife and marine life. The protection of the environment depends on the decisions made by the government. Several non-government organizations, the NGOs, with the objective to preserve and conserve the environment, such as Greenpeace, decided to tackle this situation. It did several research on the ecosystems on the Arctic, just to prove to the government that they are endangered species, even new species that must be protected, regardless of whether the species lives on land or on water. Oil and gas drilling would result in various pollution such as sound, air, water. These pollution could also affect the landscape of the place. Thus, the ethical dilemmas would be in between the benefits and satisfactions of the country's economy, the government's benefits, or the preservation of the Arctic for a balanced ecosystem and also protecting the unique and endangered species. These ethical dilemmas will definitely affect the decision makings of the government to drill in the Arctic. The government are facing with ethical dilemmas frequently and are also solving problems by amending the appropriate laws and regulations stipulated in the environmental law and such that must be complied by the oil and gas companies. For example, Obama's permission to proceed with the oil and gas drilling of the Arctic offshore. He prohibits drilling on 1.4 million acres of the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge. The area to be on a shallow water was also one of the reasons why he permitted the activities, as it would need less pressure than deep water drilling. However, will that be enough to save the Arctic, as not everything can be protected by the law? Therefore, we can see here ethical dilemmas is a critical decision that you must choose, as you cannot have both at one time. It's either you choose satisfaction for the citizens or to preserve and conserve the environment. That is all from me. Thank you.
Last but not least, questions for today's episode. Do you think there are unintended or undesirable consequences of framing Arctic drilling as an either-or issue? Example, as one of the pits environmentalists against business leaders. Why or why not? Thank you for the question. Yes, there are unintended or undesirable consequences of framing Arctic drilling, since environmentalists had mentioned that this activity poses immense risk to the environment while reinforcing a reliance of dirty, environmentally unfriendly sources of energy. Critics claim that industrial activity associated with offshore drilling in the Arctic could harm native animals, including polar bears, walruses, seals, and whales already jeopardized by climate warming and declining levels of sea ice. Environmentalists argue that oil companies have not demonstrated the capability to clean up an oil spill in the water obstructed by ice. Furthermore, extracting oil only perpetuates a fossil fuel economy and will contribute dangerously in rising global temperature, thereby causes climate change. While the business leader cannot ignore with the fact Arctic water holds 26 billion barrels of recoverable oil, Obama once said in his weekly address, "I share people's concerns about offshore drilling. I remember the BP spill in the Gulf of Mexico all too well, but the economy," he said, "still relies on oil and gas while it transitions to cleaner renewable fuels." If Arctic offshore drilling will continue for a long time, we might face extinction of Arctic animals such as polar bears and seals. The peoples and animals that live in the Arctic depend on its unique ecosystem to survive. For them, climate change is not a debate, it's a daily reality. Pollutants that persist in the environment are particular concerns in the Arctic because they are carried in the atmosphere and oceans and they are in the food that people eat, such as whale fat. Many chemicals accumulate in fat, and animals with long lifespans tend to have high levels of chemical contaminants in fatty tissues. Because these contaminants become more concentrated as they move up to the food chain, top predators such as polar bears and wolves acquire the highest concentrations. Arctic indigenous people who depend on local wildlife for sustenance have daily intakes of toxic substances that can be 10 times higher than is tolerable, and such pollutants pass through blood and breast milk to the fetuses and children of affected adults. Global warming is happening, and this activity can worsen the situation, such as reduces ice cover, which reflects light, increasing areas of darker open water, the region warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. Arctic ice is melting even faster as the ocean absorbs the heat. Arctic water temperature in winter have increased between 2 and 3 degrees over the last 50 years. The information shows that climate change is already a reality at the North Pole, directly affecting the ice pack. Related to the increased level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, ocean acidification has increased 30% since the beginning of the industrial era, since the surface area that absorbs carbon dioxide increases as the ice melts, and is reduced when the water gets covered by ice. Thus, the disappearance of many species that will not survive such a rapid rise in pH level of the water. Acidification also causes a change in the way water is stratified in layers by difference in temperature, salinity, and acidity. I believe all the panel have greatly shared their opinions and inputs about today's issue about Arctic offshore drilling. Now, audience at home can give us a call if you have any question. We will gladly give you answers about your concern.
Hello?
Hello? Yes, sir.
Hello? Yes. My name is Akmal. I'm from Malacca. I have a question. I want to ask, can you think of an example of another contentious issue that has been framed in an either-or way? What would be an ethically ideal way to resolve this issue and why? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, thank you. Thank you for another interesting question. So I would like to give poaching as an example of another contentious issue that has been framed in an either-or way. Poachers is an activity where they will kill or capture animals to sell them locally or to the global trade in wildlife. Wildlife trading is a major black market that's been increased alongside rising wealth in Asia, a major consumer of wildlife. There are actually many efforts to stop poaching. Many countries make poaching as an offense punishable by prison or monetary fees. Because poachers in Africa and Asia are often impoverished local people who make small profits in comparison to traders and kingpins, penalties for poaching wildlife are generally less severe than those for trafficking wildlife. There are also numerous non-profit organizations around the world working to end wildlife poaching. Some of these groups have helped to promote alternative, more sustainable ways for poachers to earn a living. Another way people are working hard to end poaching is by trying to decrease demand for illegal wildlife and wildlife parts. If no one's buying the products, there will be no need to kill the animals. Why we need to stop poaching activities? Obviously, it will affect on the animals. Extinction is the greatest threat to animals that are victims of wildlife poaching. In 2011, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature declared the western black rhinoceros extinct. This subspecies of the critically endangered black rhino was poached due to the belief in the healing properties of its horn. The Sumatran tiger is a critically endangered species right now. It is poached and sold for its parts such as skin, teeth, bones, and claws, which sell for up to 21,000 ringgit Malaysia. Poaching is more lucrative than other jobs that are available in the region, a harsh reality faced by many individuals and communities. In addition, poaching is also dangerous to the environment. When the North American grey wolf was on the brink of extinction due to trophy hunting and poaching, the moose populations in Yellowstone National Park soared. With no natural predator, the moose nearly ate the aspen tree to extinction. Now, because of the increasing populations of grey wolves in the park, moose populations are balancing out and the aspen tree is recovering. Our ecosystems are sensitive and must be preserved. The economic challenge of a community can lead to poaching, which in turn can lead to endangerment and, in the worst case, extinction of different species. We need various species of flora and fauna in our environmental ecosystem so they can maintain healthy and balanced. The survival of our own species depends on it.